This part of my yard was eroding onto the driveway, looked terrible, and while it did provide habitat for resident toads, a lot could be improved. That's why I decided to transform this unusable land into a shade water garden to fix the issues and improve our friend's home. The shaded nature of this location and the toads dictated how I reimagined it. The eastern hemlocks, not to be confused with the invasive poison hemlock, shade this area for most of the day. Only certain plants will thrive here, including one of the area's few redeeming qualities, moss. While some will grow in full sun, most prefer shaded conditions like this. Second, the American toads often rest under the flat stones. That meant this feature had to become a shade garden built around the toads. Before I can really do anything significant, there are two things I have to address. First, I gotta pull out all of the old stuff, and then I have to do something about this erosion issue. Most of the plants growing here weren't native, so I didn't save them. The moss, however, I did. I went through the entire area, doing my best to collect every patch possible. Afterward, I got to work pulling the weeds like dandelions and clovers. As I was pulling out unwanted plants here, I heard a toad squeaking. It sounded like this. And I was concerned that I had put a bucket on him or stepped on him or something like that. And then I glanced up and realized that he's actually under this. I don't see any others yet, so I'm going to have to keep my eyes peeled and account for that whenever I redo everything. A plant that was growing in here that was actually native are the common blue violet. While often treated as weeds, they create beautiful ground cover and produce high quality pollen when they flower, so I set them aside for later. After I finished that, I realized a smaller toad had emerged from its burrow under a nearby rock. I placed it temporarily in a bucket for safekeeping. This is when I removed the remaining stones. If they're not sunken into the ground and have a depression near the front, a toad is often underneath. Based on that, I had a sneaking suspicion there would be one here, and sure enough there was. I placed him in a bucket as well. After the breeding season, which ended a few weeks ago, toads aren't very nomadic. Once they've established a home, they tend not to migrate far from when they emerge at night to hunt for food. Since this was their home, I didn't want to move them elsewhere, and although I didn't find pleasure in it, I felt that keeping them in a bucket for a day was a reasonable thing to do. Anyway, after removing the stones, I could finally pull up the landscape fabric, which had been an eyesore since I moved in. I also didn't want to bother James, so I decided the best option was to block the opening with bricks until the coast was clear. With the land reset and the toads safe, I could get to work on the wall, starting with a trench along the driveway. I lined this with scraps of geotextile fabric before collecting some fill to establish a base layer. I was imagining a natural aesthetic and didn't feel like leveling blocks, so I decided to build with stones. Luckily, I already had plenty of those for other projects I'm working on. Now, most are too big to lift by hand, yet small enough to move around with relative ease, like this one. I moved it onto a cart, strapped it in, and hauled it off. With the feature being on a hill, it only made sense to let gravity do the work from here. Other than working in a small space, flipping them to the site was easy enough, and with stones this large, I only needed to do it 3 times. Moving the second went about as smoothly as the first, but aligning the desired faces together was a little more challenging. However, once I got them the way I wanted, fine-tuning them with the landscape bar was a breeze. I also fit smaller stones between them. The third rock was flatter and more stubborn about going down the hill, yet it did fit into the other like a puzzle piece, so I couldn't complain. This arrangement was perfect for what I was trying to do, so I backfilled it for drainage and stability. Doing so also allowed me to adjust their angles. I lightly hammered smaller stones in gaps and used flat pieces to transition into the yard. After that, I pulled back the liner, filled the slope with all the excavated dirt, and tamped it down. With the land now stabilized, it was ready for the water feature. My intention was to make this fairly small, with a focus on creating a microclimate for the toads, while providing drinking surfaces for pollinating insects that fly through. That meant this hole didn't need to be large, just enough to fit a few milk crates. I also had to account for a pump, which I'd house in this drain pipe. So I removed a length, checked for placement, and adjusted the hole accordingly. That's when I threw down some fill to provide a better foundation for the crates. Then I lined the hole with geotextile fabric to minimize erosion and protect this EPDM liner from punctures. What's nice is that aside from the pump, everything I used to build this was scraps from other projects. For the ease of working, I decided to zip tie everything together. I knew this would be helpful for the drain pipe so it wouldn't move around when accessing the pump. This contraption still fit perfectly in the hole, so all I had to do then was trim the excess liner before folding the materials over, backfilling around it, and tamping it down. Using the back of a shovel or pick can help get everything down into the tight space and minimize settling. I hope you're enjoying the build so far and all the views of my chicken stick legs. Like and subscribe. It's the next day and it would not be a water feature build without the rain. It's not really a big deal though, and I should be able to get this done today and get the toads back home. I just checked on them and everyone looks fine, so the only thing left to do now is to get to work. Before I could do anything else, I had to adjust the crates. I believe they went off leveling from all the tamping, and luckily it was a simple fix. I just removed dirt from the high side and shifted it as needed. The crates are the key to how this works. They create a void for water while providing structure for stones or other elements. Now I had originally planned to use the top crate to hold a spouted bucket and create a makeshift spillway. That was until I saw it in action. Instead, I decided to use this for another stacking platform by turning it around and digging behind it for the bucket. Regardless, these adjustments made room for the bucket, which I tilted to encourage flow. I wouldn't know how that would work without seeing it for myself. Shale rock faces are very common in my area, and after a good rain, water gently cascades down them. It's captivating and the inspiration for how I wanted this to look. With that in mind, a small pump would be ideal for recreating this look. It just took some time to fill the bucket. Once it did, I began experimenting. I saw that it had some potential, so I removed the excess pipe and concealed the crate with geotextile to keep animals out. The most important part of a feature like this is the starting flow point. If it doesn't work right, nothing else will. I don't know why, but it didn't look right, and I was beginning to think I'd have to scrap it altogether. As I was working, I thought maybe I just need a different perspective to get inspired. So I switched focus to the exterior. I filled around the bucket, then blended the landscape with the water feature. Placing geotextile behind these stacked stones will help prevent soil from eroding between them. I even added an old oak branch to the mix. Afterward, I trimmed the liner around the bucket when I realized that it was the issue. It was completely unnecessary for a build like this, so I swapped it out for an old 3/4 inch flare nozzle, which made a similar, if not better effect. This gave me the inspiration I needed to detail the stacked sandstone feature. I even began experimenting with moss to see how it would alter the flow. I also trimmed the liner against the branch and locked it down with stainless truss screws. This made it much easier to hide with smaller stones and moss. While the stacked stones on the left helped blend things together, I decided to use another large rock from the pile on the right. Thankfully I made the correct selection because it fit quite well and helped tie this area to the look of the retaining wall. Adding this and a few smaller stones allowed me to conceal most of the liner on the right. This branch helped too. It just needed some encouragement and moss. Then I shifted my focus to the top. I filled around the nozzle before concealing it. I also built a stacked formation to create a hide where I had found the one toad. The thing with these hides is that most of the land is now packed with mud, and toads prefer soft dirt where they can burrow. So I dug out any area that would become a room in this toad hotel and replaced it with loose soft soil. As much as I wanted to continue with the details, I had to take time to spray everything down to remove caked on mud. This was also when I decided to plug the drain pipe, as well as fill the spillover area and retaining wall hides with pea pebbles. These stones are here from yesterday whenever I moved everything over, and I've been slowly taking stuff and moving them to the new feature, and as I did, I realized that another toad had taken up residence under here. I got most of the foundational stuff out of the way, and really I just got to add the details and the plants. I'm going to add the plants first, so that way if I don't complete this today, I can still let the toads go and let them do their thing. Native gardening is something I've been familiarizing myself with, so that's what I wanted to do here. I have plenty of plants in my yard too, like self-heal, which I often find in shaded areas. It creates great ground cover and beautiful flowers, while also serving as a host plant for the clouded sulfur butterfly. However, to really lean into the shade garden look, I knew I had to focus on ferns like the netted chain and Christmas fern. These were honestly the best choice possible for the area. Their arched shape just kinda hugs the landscape in a way that looks intentional. Plus, they often grow in the areas that inspired this water feature. Unfortunately, I was beginning to run out of daylight and couldn't do much else. Still, it was coming together well, and I was happy I didn't give up on the project. As I said, this is meant to be a toad hotel. Before the renovation, there were only a few viable stones for them to use, but now there are at least 20. That is if they choose to use them. We're pretty much out of daylight, so I'm going to put the toads back where I found them, and hopefully they enjoy their new home. Go on. I'm not sure where this one is. Whoa. Better also let this guy out. I did not plan for that. You missed it, bud. I might as well add this one to the mix. Whoa! Here, bud. That was great and all, but I was curious to see what the toads would do next. Initially, not much happened. That was until the last toad I found began to stir. He scoured the edges of the retaining wall, carefully inspecting the crevices, and even found a snack in the process. Then he decided to climb the branch, using it as a ramp to check out of the hotel. Based on his starting location, I believe James is who decided to explore next. He examined the water feature before climbing down the branch, though he too found a snack. What I found extremely surprising about this entire thing was how carefully he examined the elevated branch. Toads often seem kind of clunky and uncoordinated, but I gotta say that every move here seemed very intentional. It's pretty cool to see. However, like the one before him, he too checked out of the hotel. I set up the camera before leaving and saw all 4 toads at that time. I skimmed through the footage several times and it doesn't appear like the other 2 left, though I was unable to locate them the following morning with the borescope, but that's alright. I'm sure they'll turn up at some point and others will board again, but if not, there's no shortage of places for them on our property. Anyway, I still had to add the finishing touches to the feature. I thought the violets would look good up front, especially once they spread. Then I collected natural hardwood mulch and covered the soil. It really helped tie things together without looking artificial. Of course, I also had to add any remaining patches of moss between the stones. Finally, I sprayed everything down. Less than 3 days earlier, this was a pretty undesirable location. The retaining wall significantly cleans up the space, and it just looks cool. That said, I do have to finish up the left side with the staircase, but that's a job for another time. Even so, the elements came together well to create something that I believe looks quite natural, especially with the native plants. I also think it's a good example of what can be done in a small location. Hopefully the animals like it too. If you enjoyed this project, you'll also like the time I made a Vanishing Waterfalls planter pot fountain, and when I built a budget DIY pond in 5 days. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, Serpa Squad, take care and peace.